Hey, what's up, guys? Bucky. Just kind of on a late night terror, just it's 1 a.m. over here, and I've been working all day and just feeling inspired, So just, whenever I feel inspired, I think it's important for me to share. And one of the things that's been coming up for me is that it's amazing what happens in your life when you start to live from who you are. There's so many people that I work with that are on the tipping point, of making a decision. And they're so nervous about, like, what is it going to look like if I do this thing, if I try this thing, if I try this business, or if I try to be in this work. Every single person, almost for every single person, when it's right, and this is one of the distinctions in this, is that when it's right for them, and this is one of the questions maybe to ask for yourself is like, when am I in that where I'm about to make a decision that's right for me? And maybe what I'm being confronted with is I'm being confronted with a bunch of fear and a bunch of worry and a bunch of anxiety. But almost every single person, when they're in a decision like that, and they actually cross, it's amazing what happens in the world around you, in the world around them. It's amazing, almost the divine intervention that starts to take place. And I couldn't tell you about, there's so many stories of, I didn't know if I was going to have the money and I decided to do this. And then the next week this happened. Or I didn't know if this was possible. And I decided to do a Facebook Live, and then instantly I got this person. And it's been true for me as well. That process has been so true for me as well, is that in my willingness to be who I am, the universe, God, the divine, the world around me has responded. And this brings up a really cool conversation for all of us. And I think it's this idea, and for me, my namesake, Buckminster Fuller, if you've never heard of that name before, or if you've never heard of that person before, amazing person to study, amazing theory, amazing view on the world and view on humanity and view on the interactions of human beings and the universe, this thing we call universe, this thing we call energy, this thing we call God, right? So, his belief and my belief as well is that we live in a communicative universe, and that God, the divine universe, energy, whatever you want to call it, is constantly in communication with us. And this phrasing of learn to hear the whispers so that you don't have to hear the screams is really something that has derived from that philosophy, is that there's always a communication. There's always a communication that's taking place. And if we're feeling, our emotions in a lot of ways are the compass in that communication. And having eyes to see and a heart to feel is something that's really important for us to develop, right? But it's not always what you think, right? We sometimes associate negative emotions to negative things and happy emotions or positive emotions to positive things. And it's not always that, right? But how can we work through the noise, and how can we work through ourselves in order to make the distinctions about what emotions represent for us? And I think one of the things that people talk about a lot is this idea of flow. And flow is one of those indicators of that description of flow, where things come easy or things come hard, right? Where things around me feel like everything that I'm doing is a battle, or that there's a level of support and there's a level of guidance and there's a level of assistance in that. And that happens externally. And sometimes we're so blinded by our plans, so blinded by our position in our lives, being ourselves, that we can't actually see the things that are going on. And this is really important for me. I was just telling the story tonight, and I was talking about 2015, 2014, in my construction days, right? It was only 2 years ago. I got back from Bali. I was living in Bali for 5 years, and I just came back, and I was looking for a job, and it was cool because, at the time I was working at the Chopra Center as the event manager, and there was pieces of it that I really loved, and there were pieces of it that I didn't like, and, in that question, there was a divine intervention by my understanding. Opportunity for me to get this job in this position, and it was like basically like a golden handshake. It was I couldn't describe it anywhere else. I met I met the CEO of a company, had a conversation with them, and within that 5 minutes was offered a job that was basically an $80,000 handshake, $100,000 handshake. And for me, when things like that happen, it's important to follow that. So I went into construction. I was like, I'm gonna hold a sign. I'll dig a hole, whatever it is, and I'll do all this stuff and I'll work my butt off. But when it started to shift was when I decided that my life was going to be around that. and that this was not a temporary solution, but this was going to be my permanent life, and me being who I am. And maybe if you follow me, you know about who I am. But in that moment, you know, I compromised so much, and I made a decision that I was going to dedicate my life to this thing, and that's not what it was about. You know, I was feeling the security, I was feeling the safety, and, you know, I was in a relationship at the time where I was being supported to do that. And, you know, there was so many difficult parts about it. You know, it was really hard at the time, and I was still traveling, and I was still teaching, and I had the flexibility. So I loved that part of it. I love working hard. I love being outside. I love being with the guys. But I started to feel myself emotionally be drained. And I started to, you know, give up on some of the things that were really important to me. And as I started to envision my life as this construction worker, right, you can imagine me as a construction worker for the rest of my life, right? And the people that I've worked with in the past, you know, some of the guys that I work with on the job and things, they're like, totally, dude, that totally was not you. It wasn't, you know, it was a square peg trying to go into a circle hole. And it just wasn't it. It was never going to fit for me. And totally grateful for it, though, totally blessed. But it was interesting because in that moment when I decided to say, like, this is what I was going to do, you know, God intervened, the universe intervened, and it totally dismantled the whole situation. You know, the person that I was being trained with got fired. The company started to do really poorly. We almost lost the job, and I was out of work. And, you know, it's interesting. It's interesting when those things happen. And that, for me, was a very loud communication. But what happened right after that was that immediately was invited in a similar type of way into the work that I love. And I was back on the road. And at the end of that, had an amazing invitation to step into even a greater passion and greater purpose, right? Went out to Bali for another 30 days and signed another big contract. And that kind of kicked off my financial stability, right? And it's amazing what starts to happen when you start to live from who you are. It's amazing how it's amazing the momentum and the flow that you can create when you just start to trust that. You listen to the signs and you start to follow and be led. And that was the moment where I really dedicated everything of who I am, right? Because, you know, we all get lost in transitions. We all get lost in difficult times. And, you know, one of the ways to move through transitions is to understand that transitions are going to be chaotic and that there's going to be lots of things that are moving around you. And how can I stay grounded in that? And the reason why I'm so passionate about it is because, you know, in a lot of ways, it's what saved my life. It's what saved my life, is me being grounded in who I am and me being centered in who I am and me having to be who I am no matter what, at all costs. You know, and after that whole experience, you know, sometimes we all have moments where we're drowning and we have to be pulled out. And I think when our passion is big enough and our purpose is large enough, you know, the divine really steps in. You know, so thank God, literally thank God. Thank God for pulling me out of that space and allowing me to see what I needed to see so I can do what I'm doing today. And I can be living in my passion today and making an impact in the way that only I can. And I think, you know, you have to, for all of us, there's going to be moments where we teeter when we come up and down. And, you know, what my greatest lessons of my entire life is that there's always only one thing for us to do. And that is to listen to ourselves, listen to our heart and act on it. So, you know, I just wanted to have that conversation and invite us into that space of, you know, if you're on the teeter-totter, if you have something that you want to create that you're not creating, if you're struggling, or if you're doing something that you feel is, you know, and here's the other thing, right? Like, we can always justify the things that we're doing. We can always say, you know, like, this is pretty good. I really kind of like this. And there's parts of it that are really exciting, or we can always make the best out of a situation, right? We can always optimize. You know, I've always been an optimist my entire life. I've always been an optimist. I've always been in situations and also in people. And, you know, we can always say, yeah, but there's parts of it that I really like, and there's parts of it that are really cool, and there's parts of it that are really exciting. I like this part, you know, and there's a difference between doing some things that you like or partially expressed And, you know, about in his mentorship, he doesn't like to call it a mentorship, but for me, it's been a mentorship that I've been going through with my father over the last 2-3 weeks. Is like, what is at the tip of your spear? What is at the tip of your spear? You know, and is my passion, is my purpose at the tip of my spear? Am I actually doing the things that I'm meant to do full capacity? And yes, there's always things that we're growing into. That's a given, right? And this is the conversation that I talk to the group about and has talked to all my clients about, is this idea of an infinite ascent. Is that as a facilitator, trainer, as a coach, as a human being, you're in an infinite ascent. You know, growth is infinite. It's constant. We're either green and growing or we're ripe and rotting. That's one of my favorite phrases, right? We're either green and growing or we're ripe and rotting. There is no in between. There is no in between. There is no pause. There is no hold to sort this out, right? And you know, it's interesting. It's interesting to go through those scales and that up and down. But how can we be progressively moving towards the things that we want, or the things that we are, right? So. It's a beautiful gift to be alive. And thank God we live in a universe and we live in a relationship where we are all being into who we are. And the invitation is to listen and to act and to trust, right? Do you have the courage to be you? Do you have the audacity to be you? Do you have the willingness to be you? Are you ready to be you? And when we do that, following our joy, following our passion, is where that thing called flow comes from, is where that thing called ease comes from. Not that it's going to be easy, but not that it's going to be always fast, but it's nice to have some flow and to have some energy. And there's some things that settle in here with your flow, as well as some things that transpire. It was part of my life where it was part of my practice that every single day I requested a miracle. And I said, you know what? I request every single day that I'm going to see an example of divine so clearly that I know it is him, I know it is her, I know that it's it. Right? I know that it's present in my life. And it's amazing what happens. If you've never done that before, it's a great experiment for you. It's just to request a sign or in life, and almost immediately, right? Within hours, within moments, within a day, that day, you'll get to see that presence. You know, and it's the conversation of that the divine is always with us, and that we're always supported, and that there is a larger design than what we think, and there's a plan for all of us, and we all have the opportunity to walk. Right? So, you know, whether that's a passion-based business, or whether that's speaking your truth and being an artist, or whether that's creating movies, or whatever that is for you, right? Whatever that is for you, my invitation for you is to realize that that is the most important thing in your life, and to go out and do it, With that said, be you. We'll see you.